Good afternoon. We'll start in just 1 minute and give everyone a chance to get in. I'm Kathleen Kennedy. I'm an associate professor in retailing and consumer science, and I'm pleased to be here today to talk about inclusive classrooms and to present some ideas about how we can use the UDL, Universal Design for Learning framework, to create more engaging assignments for our students. We're going to start by just walking through our objectives, give you a little bit of background on universal design and universal design for learning, talk about 2 successful assignments that I created and have used in classes. Then we'll do some breakout groups so that you can help me fix an assignment that I've been unable to make successful for a variety of reasons. I'm not exactly sure why, but I'm sure you'll figure that out. And then we'll wrap up with a conclusion, and I'll stay around for some questions and answers if you have any. Universal Design for Learning is a framework that can be used to guide course design, course delivery, and also to guide the design of assignments and assessments. And today we're going to look at how Universal Design for Learning can be used to give us better ideas about how to create assignments that engage students and respect diversity, foster participation, and remove barriers. By doing that, we enable more students to be engaged and increase their learning. So I first started working with Universal Design, which is the predecessor to Universal Design for Learning. Universal Design came out of architecture, and it was an idea that instead of having to build accommodations for people, we could just design better buildings in the first place that had fewer barriers. That moved rapidly to digital. And I was working in e-commerce at the time, and we started in the early and mid-90s to look at digital spaces and remove barriers from digital spaces, have ways in which people could use websites that were open no matter what their sensory skill set was. Universal Design for Learning really starts in 1999 with a book, Universal Design and Education, which put forward an idea that we could take the principles of universal design and apply them to learning. That learning didn't need to have barriers if we thought the way in which we instructed people. David Rose, who was a cognitive neuroscience researcher, then took this idea and combined it with neuroscience findings, which were emerging at a very rapid rate in the mid-2000s, the mid-20s, whatever we call them. And we got Universal Design for Learning. It's widely used, and it's a very flexible approach to teaching and learning. UDL guidelines come in 3 areas: representation, expression, and engagement. And we'll be focusing on one part of that today. There's a parallel approach, which is called Universal Design for Instruction, which focuses specifically on college instruction for diverse learners, but it's more focused on instruction. So we'll really be using the core UDL framework today. Universal Design for Learning is a somewhat unique system. It's a set of guidelines, not a prescription for how you should behave, but more like a menu of ideas that you can use to make learning more accessible, to remove barriers, and to increase engagement. They can be mixed and matched and used situationally. There's 3 basic areas or principles of UDL. First is engagement, the why of learning. Second is representation, having the what of learning. How can you recognize things? And this lines up to constructionism, if you're familiar with that concept, which is linking things to knowledge that learners bring to the classroom or bring to the course. And finally, what we're going to be focusing on today, action and expression, or the how of learning. Um, Action and expression links to goal-directed learning and differentiating the ways that students can express what they know. Assignments are one way students can take knowledge and apply that knowledge and demonstrate what they know, but also reinforce that learning um, and be able to access it in the future. Each of the three principles of UDL is once again divided into three sections. And we're going to be focusing on part of the action and expression portion, which is expression and communication and executive function. And I put together just a quick handout that you all will get, which gives you some more detail on this. UDL action and expression has some underlying principles, but I wanted to move to the design solutions, specifically talking about assignments. So first of all, learners differ in the ways they navigate a learning environment. Uh, Many times I've experienced something where I think I've written very clear instructions, and I'll get an email or a question in class from a student saying, I really don't understand what I'm supposed to do. And until I speak the instructions, the students don't quite get what they need to do. So there's some design solutions for this gap and how different people navigate learning environments. First is extreme transparency, explaining to students what they will learn and how they will prove they learned it from an assignment. Second is doing multimodal instructions. We do, and as instructors, many of us spend a lot of effort to present learning materials in different forms. And then we go to an assignment and we provide written instructions and don't really think about the fact that may not be the best way for many learners to get that information. So one of the strategies I've been using is to start to present assignment instructions in writing with graphic frameworks and illustrations, and by recording a short video or audio of the instructions, which is more readily used by students than turning on some kind of screen reader, particularly students who don't have sensory issues but who have learning differences. Providing interactive aids. Sometimes, and in one course I have a big assignment, it's a large part of the grade. It's very important students understand this. So I actually have them take a D2L self-assessment, which is a short quiz in D2L, that lets them confirm that they understood what they have to do for the assignment. So it's 5 questions, multiple choice, it's very quick. They don't get points for it, and almost the entire class does it. It's optional, and it's helped make people focus on individual and key parts of the assignment. Providing frameworks and templates allows people to store information and organize it in ways that they can access it and use it. We often do this for theories or core principles in learning, but then we'll give students a complex assignment and not give them any kind of framework or a template to organize their work. And so organizational barriers become a problem. Learners differ in the ways they can express what they know. In reality, there's really not one means of action or expression that's optimal for all learners. I'm not proposing that we let people do every assignment every possible way, but what I have done is allowed students to have some assignments that give them flexibility. I'll give you 2 examples today, and also to engage the learners in co-creation of their learning of the assignments. The one that I failed on in the example that I'm going to give you for the breakout groups was an assignment where students were involved in co-creation of learning, and it collapsed in miserable failure. So I will get to that one. Action and expression require a great deal of strategy, practice, and organization, and this is an area where learners can differ. We scaffold learning, but rarely do we think about scaffolding assignments so that we provide temporary supports to move students along the path of learning how to successfully complete assignments. So in my courses, I start with easy assignments or guided exercises that introduce needed skills. For example, in one of my classes, I have students write a personal introduction. I provide them with a sample assignment, which happens to be my personal introduction. So they have a chance to look at my personal background and learn about me. But I also annotate that using the D2L annotation tools and explain that that's how I'm going to grade their assignments in the course. So they get exposed to an easy assignment. They see a sample of the quality of work that I'm expecting to get. They learn something interesting about me, and it's not really something they can copy. And they get exposed to a way in which I will assess students in the course. If I'm going to use something like we're going to be using Padlet today, I might do an easy guided assignment using Padlet so they would be exposed to the tool in advance. Providing grade transparency and assignment transparency is really important. But one other thing that is important is frequency. And there is a philosophy, and this has been proven in a large body of empirical work, frequent low-stakes assignments provide a steady information flow with students, and it has real advantages. It creates a dialogue. It's a quality dialogue about the learner's progress by having many low-stakes exercises in classes. For example, students get feedback about how they're doing throughout the course, and that reduces the stress level. How am I doing in this course? Am I going to get an A? I'm worried. It builds confidence. If I can do one part of the assignment when I have to do the bigger assignment, it's easier. And it increases motivation and engagement in the course. This is particularly useful for impersonal teaching situations. It's one thing if you have a small class, 25, 30 students in an in-person course where you are face-to-face with the students or even live online. But when you're in a asynchronous online course or a very large lecture course, frequent low stakes assignments create a situation where you get this dialogue and feedback that may not exist with all students. Now I'm going to show you a couple examples of what I've done. And the first one is from a general education course that I teach. It's called Consumers, Environment, and Sustainable Consumption. It's a Tier 1 Gen Ed. It's mostly freshmen and sophomores. They have diverse backgrounds, diverse majors, different level of knowledge or interest in the course. Some people are taking the course because they're passionate about sustainability. Other students are taking the course because their advisor put them in it. One of the things I've done in this course is use a variety of strategies to make assignments the center point of learning in the course rather than pushed instruction, meaning lectures or readings. There are lectures, there are readings, but everything has to be applied in exercises. So the exercises became very important in the course design. First and foremost, all of the assignments are built for multiple navigation strategies. They're consistent across the course, meaning I have a style and format and I maintain it throughout. They're multimedia instructions in writing, machine readable written instructions in D2L, and then I provide a video with captions. This turned out to be very useful this semester when I magically got a global section added to my course. And so I had people who weren't native English speakers in the class. The video with captions became extremely helpful. I provided students with choice and flexibility. And you'll see that in a moment. They could choose how they wanted to do it. I scaffolded the assignments from the beginning of the course clear through and made sure that if there was, you'll see on this assignment, they can use Spark, that we had already done an easier, less free exercise with Spark so they knew how to use it. Transparency. I clearly explained the learning objectives and what my expectations were, and I provided an analytical rubric that was easy to understand how they were going to earn points. And finally, I gave them recommended approaches to tools that they could access. I have a standard template that I use that's divided up the same way. It tells them the learning objectives, how long it will take, instructions, what a complete assignment looks like, and how they'll be graded. In this particular assignment, it's late in the course. Students were given the opportunity to, I'm going to watch my time here. Students were given the opportunity to create their own story, and they could create that story inspired by a nonprofit organization that maintains a video library. They were asked to tell their story in any multimedia format. I gave them suggestions on format, but as long as it met the multimedia criteria, it was acceptable, and it needed to be their story. And then the main issue that they might encounter, I tried to think ahead and figure out where could this go wrong for the students, which was D2L has a limit on file size, and multimedia files can become large. So I gave them an alternate way to do it, to turn that in. The result was the entire class did the assignment. There were no stragglers. The assignment was rated highly, and I use a 3-question assignment evaluation at the end of most of my assignments. Was it worth their time and effort? Did they understand what needed to be done? And did you learn a lot? And then I had some other measures of student engagement. One important to me is my goal is that 100% of my students do well in every assignment. I use an analytical rubric. 78% of the students in the class got a 90 or higher on this assignment, which is high. Another example of one I did was in a upper division retailing elective, students ran an e-store for the semester. This was a real store. We sold merchandise. They came up with the theming and built a retro Wildcat store working with the university bookstore for fulfillment and delivery. It was many students' favorite courses, mostly because it was real and they were dealing with real sales and real money. The project was built over the course of a semester, 4 weeks in planning. Students could pick what they wanted to focus on. Were they interested in merchandising or marketing? And then they could sign up for the last 9 weeks of the course to be in one of 10 departments. So if they were interested in PR and events, they could work in the PR and events department, and so they could specialize for a semester. They've had a feeling of accomplishment that I've not seen in many classes that I've been exposed to, and none that I've taught. The only difference was this went live versus being a prototype. They sold real merchandise. Several of them have gone on to start businesses since then. In spring of this was in fall of 2019. In spring of 2020, 8 of the students completed an advanced digital retailing independent study to build materials for the next offering, which will be fall 2021. 9 of the students graduated and have careers in digital retailing. And the positive student response to one department, which was measuring customer experience, UX, has resulted in a new course, which we're piloting in spring, and a new customer experience student layout. So I'm going to turn the tables on you. We're giving you a bit of an introduction, and we have 10 minutes. We're going to put you in breakout groups. There should be 2 links. You'll have a link to an instruction sheet and a link to a Padlet. The Padlet link is in the instruction sheet. Make sure to get the link to the sheet prior to going to your breakout room. And you have 10 minutes. I'll be here if you have any questions. Just a reminder, make sure to get a copy of the instruction sheet before you move to the room. So first of all, thank you for all the wonderful ideas. I've read most of them at the advantage of looking my go. Just as a quick wrap up, and then I'll stay around for question and answers. My conclusion after looking at this was that I gave the students, too many choices. There were 10 options, plus they could propose anything else from the rest of the world. And they started to get lost in a choice dilemma. Which would be the best one? Which one would be best for their careers? Which one would be hard? Which one would be easy? And that if I had, and I think I read someone's comment here that was similar, that if I was more linearly set up, it would be better. Meaning if you're interested in analytics, do Google Analytics and not give any other choice. But there were many other problems with this seemingly really great idea of giving students choice, and a few things here I didn't think of. And one of them was, I want to compliment Breakout Group 6 for bringing up the idea of using a discussion board or some kind of social pressure in this and social support to help students make choices rather than just talking amongst their friends, but to do it as a class, which is a really good idea that I did not consider. I understand the slides will be sent out to everyone, and I want to thank you all for the ideas and for attending today. And then if anybody has a comment or a question, I'm happy to answer them, but I do want to say thank you. And if you have a question, you can add it to chat. And I think I've got a few thank yous, but I thank everybody who came. And I do want to just say I didn't give you all the full instructions that the students received. So they had clear instructions. That wasn't one of the hurdles, but that's just, it wasn't, I was completely brain dead for the moment. But I was disappointed. That would be a better word for it. When you work on something and you think it's going to be a big win, and you turn around and you launch it and you find out it's turned into work for the students, an assignment they despise. The emails I were getting weren't emails about which should I choose, but they were, why do I have to do this? It was a whole lot of work. And I read something, Motivation and Reminders, I think maybe it was in there. I read something that a group posted about it seemed like it was a course inside a course. And the course within a course was a huge problem. And for that standpoint, the only way I would do it again is to totally integrate a certificate into a course so that the course was the certificate and not have, you have to do this course. And then, oh, you have to do this other class over here on your own and go get this certificate, because it was like they felt like they were having to do 2 classes instead of 1. And that was clear. And it seems so obvious now, but it didn't seem obvious to me in 2017. I thought, this is the greatest thing in the world. So, and I think we've all probably experienced that assignment that you do and you think it's clear as can be, and you get the very first day it's posted, you get 11 emails. So I do want to sort of wrap up today's session from anything I have to say by saying that 10 minutes before I arrived in for this session, I checked my email, and I had a student email from a student in my RCSC 150 Consumers Environment and Sustainable Consumption course about whether or not an infographic was multimedia for the Your Story of Stuff assignment, which the students are doing literally this week. So the same assignment that I chose to feature in this presentation. I didn't realize it would coincide with today, but just opened up and I just got my first question. So something that I've done multiple times, I've tested with students and worked really hard on to be crystal clear, still generates questions. But at least I know somebody read the instructions. So, and that's all really I have to say. If anybody has a question or a comment, I do want to thank everyone for the great ideas. I'm going to use them. And I plan to, yes.
Sorry, there are several questions in the chat. I don't know whether you can see it.
They're not in my chat.
Okay.
Tiffany, can you see those? My chat's empty.
So somebody asked when we'll have the recording available, and we'll have that available on the Future Leaders website after we finished adjusting the transcription by the end of the semester. And then there's another question, did they have a chance to do some type of reflective activity that would help them to match their skills and likes with particular professional job titles?
That's a great question. I put a reflection afterwards, but not before. And that's an excellent idea for something changed. The other related gap was that I thought our students, they were mostly graduating seniors, had a good idea about various career paths and what was needed. I did one lecture related to that, but I didn't really give them enough resources to know what to pick for what they were interested in. And many of them were still at that point where they couldn't quite distinguish between one part of digital and another. So I was kind of oblivious to where their knowledge gaps were related to that. I have a question from David Bradshaw. I can see them now. I'm sorry.
Okay, great.
Do you think that making the expectations clearer from the get-go would have made it more palatable to pursue the certification? It was clear what the expectations were, that they had to do one, they had to choose one from this menu. What may not have been as clear was their personal benefit from completing that. I didn't provide them with enough proof. So I could have provided them with statistical proof that if they wanted a job in marketing analytics, they needed Google Analytics certification to even apply for an entry-level job. But I just thought they'd trust me. I now know I'd have to prove it with maybe an exploratory exercise where they go out and find the job of their dream, or look at job descriptions and what are the requirements, where do you have gaps, and do a self-assessment. But I didn't put that into the course. And so that sort of inspires me with maybe a better way to set this up, which is to do a self-exploratory assignment and a self-assessment prior to them doing anything related to this. These students, and this was in a business school, these students were all actively engaged in LinkedIn, and it was part of our program. That we don't do this here in the program I am here. So LinkedIn integration is something I'll think about. But the program I was in, when they got admitted to the marketing program in their junior year, one of their very first assignments was to build their LinkedIn profile as a professional profile and work on developing that over the next 2 years. So we had a lot of career building activities built into it. However, building a LinkedIn profile into this course would be a great idea. I have the course I'm thinking about doing this in the spring has a LinkedIn assignment, so it would fit well with that. UDL's really very flexible, and prerequisite courses are fine. There's thousands of articles, so I haven't read all thousands of articles. but I've read a couple hundred of them. I've never come across anybody proposing that UDL should override prerequisite courses or prerequisite knowledge. However, anybody who's taught a quantitative course has probably been exposed to something I see regularly. Students who have gaps in their quantitative reasoning and quantitative intuition skills that the skill sets they should have developed in 4th to 6th grade, usually mathematics, who have gotten through college algebra, gotten into, a more advanced course, but can't convert decimals to percentages or do some basic math, don't understand ratios, a real common one I find. And with UDL, you provide self-assessments and support to students who have knowledge gaps. And I think writing skills. I've had students who have taken 300 level college writing courses, gotten A's, walk into a writing course and have difficulty with English grammar. So I don't see this one-to-one match between course performance and prerequisite course completion and prerequisite knowledge. So other people may have different experience. Padlet. I'm a huge Padlet fan. Somebody asked to Padlet, do we have access through UA? You can build 3 Padlets for free on Padlet. Anybody can. I love it so much. I paid for an upgraded license. It's cheap, so that I can have dozens of them in some of my classes. So I use this in my gen ed class routinely with over 70 students, and it holds up well. And you can easily build a board and copy out 8 of them and number them to match rooms and use them. So yeah, it's a wonderful tool. And they have a lot of templates. I'm going to sound like a Padlet salesperson. They have a number of templates that allow you to set up frameworks that people can put things in, or timelines or geography, put it into maps. So I will relate this to UDL. It allows students to put knowledge into boxes, into places, into spaces, which increases their ability to retain and store that knowledge. So it's a learning tool that lines up very well to the principles of UDL and to how the mind works. So I spent 5 years studying running a consumer neurosciences lab, studying attention and media consumption in brains. And so I came into this primed to love UDL, which aligns to current neuroscience, and it's getting ready to be updated again. Has been updated 3 times. It's not a static thing. So as we learn more about how people learn and how people store and retain knowledge, UDL has been adapting their framework and improving it to match the best of people's knowledge and experience. So it's dynamic, it's not static. And it's dynamic in a meaningful way. I went back, I looked at something from 1999 recently, which was a piece about network memory models, which is a core part of marketing training in the 90s. It's how we thought the brain worked in 1995. Turned out not to be true. However, it did develop a whole series of marketing practices that worked coincidentally. So it was a theory that was wrong that gave us practices that worked in the marketplace, which now people are trying to write theories to explain why they work, if that makes sense. So it had a good outcome. We've seen the same thing in learning, which is that some of the things that we do that work very effectively, there aren't cognitive learning theories to support them yet, but we know empirically that they work. Others, there's theories to support. Frequency of assignments. Low stakes frequent assignments lines up to current thinking about how people become engaged in something and activate it to work on it and to be more engaged over time. Then I want to leave one additional thought, and then I'll probably run out of things to say. Low stakes frequent assignments is a wonderful thing, but you can overdo it. And one of the reasons, have too many assignments and have so many assignments that students lose track of them. And one of the things I do is I put them into a weekly repetitive framework so that things are due on, my courses all end on Sundays. I have the students vote on what day they want to end on. Sunday has one. My courses all end on Sundays at 11:59, and I try to make the deadlines that are not linked to a specific class session all end on Sunday, and I try to limit myself so that there's not a week where they have 4 assignments due in a given week, even if they're tiny things to do. So maybe there's a reading and an assignment, but not 15 things, and I have taken classes as a student where they're beautifully designed, but they have way too many assignments. It's not the work level, it's the number of assignments. And there are a number of wonderful papers that have been written on too many assignments, fatiguing students and hitting that space of the course becomes no longer fun and becomes totally a task. And one place where people really violate that a lot is the overuse of D2L discussion boards. I've reviewed a number of courses, and that seems to be the go-to thing to put in a course. Let's get them actively engaged, but students don't view that as active engagement. They view it as another task. And that's something I've done surveys on for the past 6 years, 7 years. I despise D2L discussions and do almost anything that's not a D2L discussion that's interactive. And back to Padlet, no, but they're going to send me a commission. Doing a Padlet, which is graphic and where the students put in emoticons and images and videos and all kinds of fun stuff very easily, this doesn't feel like a discussion to them. Even if it's set up, you can set it up in a discussion format with replies, which we didn't do today because it's more graphic. VoiceThread is the third very common alternative at U of A, and I find VoiceLoad to be the media itself takes over the task so that you're spending too much time thinking about how do I do this rather than what am I saying. And the student work quality, I've done parallel assignments where I've split the class, and the work level on VoiceThread tends to be less good than in other kinds of sharing. So that's it for me, unless somebody's got another question. Thank you for the good questions. Oh, Google Jamboard. I used Google Jamboard at the beginning of this semester. And then I did a session with some University of Arizona faculty learning session of some sort, and saw Padlet, and Jamboard was dead. Jamboard has an outside limit on how many people can use it. It's not as pretty. It doesn't have as much flexibility about the different templates that you can use. So I've switched to this, but Jamboard, I use all the other Google tools, and they're supposed to be doing an update on Jamboard to make it better. And if they solve this, right now, once you have 25 users, Jamboard freezes and you can't add any more to it. Sometimes it happens at 10. My classes tend to be large and I can't use it. And that was a surprise the first time I had a Jamboard and realized it wasn't going to work. You can't use it class-wide. But I like Jamboard, by the way. I just like this better. So, but the other one
about multimodal approaches, and having that be part of UDL. I like multimodal approaches, but a lot of folks are time strapped. And I was wondering if you had recommendations about which approaches you would recommend people start with first if they haven't already used it, if there's any guidance on that.
Yeah,
That way work towards even more approaches in, what we're doing and whatnot.
yeah, I've become really cautious of anything that takes more time. So I write an assignment as a text document, and then I quickly use D2L to record a cheesy video, and I've hit myself over the head to say, some students aren't even going to watch this video, Kathleen. Nobody cares what you look like. If you stutter partway through, just post it up there. So I record often it's a 90-second video where I walk through the instructions just like a student asked me in class. What do I have to do? I don't really understand it. And then I answer that question. And because I stopped fooling around with trying to have production values or, produce a Hollywood video, it's just a temporary video I recorded for that class. It literally takes me 3 minutes. It took me a really long time. I don't know about anybody else. I hate seeing myself on camera. I didn't sign up to be doing videos. And so I'm not a fan of doing them. So I keep them really short. The other thing I stopped doing, and I'm a big fan of multimodal, but I looked back at some of my old courses that I built for online where I took the time to record every part of the course on a video. And I stopped doing that. So that takes an enormous amount of time. I produce a D2L text page that's illustrated and beautiful with all kinds of links and activities built in it. And then I create some short videos, and the page is machine readable. So it's accessible. You could be multimodal on the parts that are most important for students to know and learn, and back off a little bit. If you use D2L correctly, it's already multimodal in a way because it'll work with a screen reader. And then I use a lot of illustrations and frameworks, things that I would have put in a PowerPoint slide previously. And now I do as an illustration and I put it into D2L. So the other thing that I stopped doing was making PowerPoint slides. Students hate them. Nobody wants to watch the long video anyway. And so I've been cutting down on work and then trying to put that effort into, for example, when I launched Padlet, I recorded a 60-second video of how to use Padlet. And I recorded a 60-second, screen share video with how to do Jamboard. And so I have these little videos. I can take the Padlet video and use it in any class and move it around. The last thing I did to streamline my work process was I use Padlet. I made a choice. That's going to be my tool of choice for this kind of graphic activity. And I'm using it in all my classes. If I picked VoiceThread, then it would be VoiceThread, but I just pick a few tools and the students have to learn less and I have to prep less then. And I used to have too much variety of stuff. And then, one last thing. If you upload anything to Zoom or Panopto, you can get a reasonably good transcript automatically. I do take the time to give my students the transcripts of any video that I do and closed caption them. Takes a couple clicks. I do not go through, and maybe people think this is wrong, but I don't take the time to go through the Panopto transcript and fix the places where Panopto puts the wrong word in. So my transcripts are 95% correct, not 99% correct. And my students report back that they listen to they use the reader version of D2L, like when they're in the fitness room or something, to have something spoken to them and not read it. Then their hands are free. I'm not sure if they learn as much, but I know that I have students using it, and I teach visually. I teach disciplines that require people to see to do them professionally. So in where am I now? In 12 years of teaching, I have yet to have a visually impaired student, and yet all of my classes have are compliant with. I've never done any change for a DRC student since I started teaching. I've not needed to make an accommodation just because of the way they're built. So I don't do time tests, so there's no time accommodation. I don't put up graphics that are important to the course that aren't built with vectors and text in them that aren't machine readable. And if I do, I put a full description in, because I know that students have those descriptions read to them or read them. So I don't have things that have to be changed. That's just me. The only last thing I'll say is, if you have a course that was built for traditional learning and wasn't built to be broadly compliant, you can add some UDL parts and pieces to it to make it better and more accessible without moving to a fully accessible course. And it's really hard to take an existing course on D2L and dust it off and make it accessible. It's easiest just to rebuild it, move the content into a new site. I'll add something super cool to what they send out to you all, which is Brightspace just launched a new version of the Daylight template, which is a fully accessible D2L template that looks like the web, and it's fully compliant. It's wonderful. I just finished testing it, and it's their third version of it, and it's gorgeous. And really quickly, everything you build is, when you use this template, is already set up with reader compliant head 1, head 2, head 3. Fonts are all set up. The palettes are set up, so you don't have to go back and make adjustments for things like color. Are the colors, will the colors work, and is the palette good? Or have you put light blue on white background, which about 10% of people can't read. So I'm somebody, I happen to be learning disabled, and school didn't work very well for me. And I'm a vintage when it wasn't diagnosed, so I just thought I was stupider than everybody else, or everybody else worked a whole lot harder than I did. Something was going on for many years. Because of that, and I teach in an area, about 20% of the students in my classes are dyslexic or have a similar verbal disability. So because of that, I intuitively just wanted to make things that I could get through so students could get through them. But I constantly run into things where they're not set up for students who are in the 30% of people who have a different way of processing information. And I think we tend to think of this as a small group of people, but it's much more common than we think about. And it's a broad spectrum of differences, but they all fit into some very similar categories. So how I can't tell left from right, for example, I have a left-right disorder where I reverse everything. So it was an accomplishment for me to write these little instruction tags that say left and right and hopefully get them correctly on these things. So some things that are tough for people, but it also makes me more conscious of when I see instructions from someone where it says, use this in the left and use this in the right. About 10% of Americans have a left-right disorder. And if you can give double cues on things, look for the 3 vertical dots in the upper right corner. Now I can find the 3 vertical dots if I don't know what the right upper corner is. Having a double way to identify things, not abandoning the use of color to identify things, but not relying solely on it. You know, men tend to often have difficulty discriminating in the blue spectrum. They may not be colorblind and may not even be conscious of it, and yet they can't discriminate certain colors. Women, and this is a genetic linked factor, women tend to have a much higher degree of color perception than men. And yet women tend not to be able to distinguish audio differences. So I'll leave you with my boyfriend story. I had a boyfriend who came home once when I was in college. He says, "Oh, I got these great new gold monster cables on my stereo. Doesn't it sound great?" And I looked at it like he was from Mars. He spent $1,000 on these cables, and I couldn't hear any difference at all. Zero. One of his friends come over, and the two of them are sitting there going, "This is amazing." His girlfriend and I were sitting there going, "I don't know what they're talking about." So we have differences in populations that sometimes we forget about. They show up in ways that are, I can't distinguish a C from a C flat, for example. I think I know a lot about music, but I can't hear the difference. You know, I think I fake that I can, but I'm not sure I can. I just hear it, it's off. I don't know it's a C flat versus a C major, whereas other people can distinguish that. So we have a lot of variety of people. So I'm with that, I think I probably need to wrap. It's been a real pleasure. This is something that obviously you can tell I care a lot about, and hope that someday down the road we can disband DRCs and rename them some other kind of learning center. So thank you all for coming today.